Welcome back. This is day 2 of the dashing table runner. Here's the sample again. I hope you had fun sorting your charm pack of 5-inch squares, deciding what print to put in the middle, what to put for your half square triangles, and what to put here for your rectangle units. Today I want to show you how to make the units, the half square triangles and the rectangle units, how to trim them up and to sew them, because that's your homework for tonight, to make all 3 churn dash blocks. Let's talk about making the half square triangles. We have a half of the background and half of a print. And so you place a 5-inch square of the background on top of the 5-inch square of print. Draw a diagonal line on the light background, and then sew 1/4 inch away from both sides of your drawn line. After you've done that, you can use a ruler and a rotary cutter to cut on the drawn line. And then you will press toward the dark side. I don't really have my iron on, so I'm not going to ruin my cutting mat. But first you would press with the dark side up, press the seam allowance, and you kind of want that seam allowance to stick to your ironing surface a little bit, so that as you fold the top up, you can use the edge of the iron to push open the seam allowance to its full extent. For each churn dash, you need to make 2 sets of the light background square with the print square. And then if you make 2 sets, each set gives you 2. You need 4 for each churn dash block. So after you've pressed all of the half square triangles toward the dark, then you need to trim them. Do not forget to trim them. They are about 1/8 inch bigger than they need to be to fit with everything else in your block. I really like block lock rulers. They have a little ridge on the back that clips into the seam allowance and helps you get a really nice, perfect block if you cut all the way around it. So we're going to cut around 2 sides. Side number 3 and side number 4. See, there's not much waste there. We would just discard the little pieces that we trimmed off. So you need to trim around all 4 of your half square triangles. They need to finish at 4.5 inches. Now I'm going to show you how to use a regular ruler if you don't have a block lock ruler. Do you notice that there is a diagonal line on the ruler? So I want to place the 1-1 marks up in the upper right hand corner. The diagonal line is on the sewn line, and I want to make sure that 4.5 is here, and then I'm not cutting the square too small. So I'll push up that corner of the ruler as far as I can to get the straight lines. And then I will turn my square like this. And now this cut edge that I made, I can put on the 4.5 inch lines of the ruler. Here's 4.5, here's 4.5, and you can see that I have just a tiny bit to trim off. There's the diagonal line is on the seam line, so just trim that little bit off. So whether you have a 6.5 inch square ruler or block lock ruler, either one will work. You need to trim these to be 4.5 inches square. Now the next unit you need to make for the churn dash block is a rectangle unit. So you make this by cutting a square in half of the print and a square and a half of the light background. So when you cut them, It's 2.5 inches by 5 inches. And then you sew them together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance and press the fabric seam allowance toward the darker print. It's a great idea to check this measurement. You want it to be 4.5 by 5 inches. And if any of the pinked edges of your charm square extend past this measurement, it's a good idea to trim them off. You'll be much less frustrated when you put your block together if everything is exactly 4.5 by 5 for this unit, 4.5 square for the half square triangles, and then 5-inch square for the center of your block. Now, since we've trimmed our half square triangles and the center square and the rectangle units, we can lay out our block. If you remember from my discussion yesterday, I didn't have 2 light blue squares. I have to use 2 different prints. So I'm placing those opposite each other in my block. I have a half square triangle, rectangle unit, half square triangle. And I will sew these units together in sets of 3, making 3 rows. This is block number 2 for my table runner. I've sewn the 3 rows together. And I want to show you how they are pressed. The top and bottom row, I pressed the seam allowance toward the rectangle unit. And for the center row, I pressed the seam allowances away from the center unit. And that way, when you pin your block together, these seams will nest really nicely because the seam allowances are opposing. So when you join the 3 rows together, begin by pinning right there and right there. Then pin in the center, the ends, and the middles there. Sew your block together. Here's block number 3 for my table runner, my dashing table runner. And as you can see, I remembered to put the same fabric opposite as I had to do on all 3 blocks. But I think the casual observer won't even realize that it's 2 different prints. I'm really liking how my table runner looks, and I hope you have as good success with yours. Come back tomorrow and we'll talk about putting the sashing and the borders on. Until then, have fun.